Good morning, everyone. Please confirm if you can hear me.
Good morning,
Yes,
Rohana.
good morning. Good morning, Joseph. Thank you for that confirmation. So just by way of introduction, my name is Ruhaina Razak, and I'm privileged to be your moderator for today's webinar. In today's panel discussion, we are looking at driving efficiency and collaboration in internal audit delivery. Now, as organizations continue to navigate increasing regulatory expectations and evolving risk, as well as increasing demands on our various stakeholders. On a consistent basis, the internal audit function is being challenged not only to provide assurance, but also to deliver greater value through innovation and stronger collaboration across our various teams and business units. In today's panel discussion, we will explore how internal audit collaborates across the various functions, and as well as streamlining audit delivery, leveraging collaboration to enhance effectiveness, as well as adopt practical strategies that improve both operational performance and stakeholder engagement. We are privileged to have with us a distinguished panel of professionals who bring deep experience and diverse perspective across internal audits, risk management, governance, and operational excellence. Now, permit me to introduce our panelists. As the saying goes, ladies first. So we'll start with our first panelist, who is Chika Ikwealo. Chika Ikwealo, just a bit of profile on who she is a seasoned and versatile banking professional, a member of the country management team at Standard Chartered Bank with close to 2 decades of experience across Nigeria and the broader African market, 18 of which have been in various leadership roles. She brings deep expertise spanning across risk management, internal audits, process transformation, credit, and human resources. She is a CFA chartered holder, a chartered accountant, and a fellow of both ACCA and Institute of Chartered Accountants Nigeria, an honorary member of the Chartered Institute of Bankers, and a member of the Institute of Directors. Now, Chika is recognized for her focused, results-oriented approach and her ability to lead with energy, fairness, and emotional intelligence in complex, highly regulated environment. She has a proven track record of building, mentoring, and inspiring diverse teams to deliver sustainable outcomes. Beyond her professional achievement, she is a passionate advocate for neurodiversity. As a mother and a caregiver, she actively champions inclusion and support for neurodiverse individuals, including establishing a learning circle to support colleagues with similar responsibilities. She values continuous learning and enjoys spending quality time with her family alongside personal interests such as dancing. So with some virtual claps, let's welcome our first panelist for today in the person of Chika Ikwelo. Chika, if you're on a call, thank you. She's sharing her video. Hello,
Yeah, thank you.
Chika.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Your first name is Ruhaina.
Ruhaina.
Ruhaina. Great, Ruhaina. Thank you very much.
All
Thank
right.
you. I'm
Nice to
excited to be
meet
here.
you.
Same here.
Thank you. We are happy to have you today. All right. So on to our second panelist, who is in the person of Chris Joseph Haruna. He is a highly motivated, analytically driven, and result-oriented chief internal auditor with over 14 years of progressive experience spanning across internal audits, external audit, fraud investigation, risk management, and corporate governance. Chris is a bachelor. He holds a Bachelor of Commerce from the University of Cape Coast, an MBA from University of Professional Studies. He's a chartered accountant. He is he is also a certified internal auditor of the Institute of Internal Auditors. He is also a fellow member of the IIA. He's an associate member of the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners and holds the ACCPA Certified Professional Designation in Anti-Money Laundering Compliance. Chris began his career at PwC Ghana, where he served in the Audit and Assurance Division for 5 years, rising through the ranks to a senior associate level. He subsequently joined Guarantee Trust Bank Limited in Ghana, where he served as a head of internal control and later as the head of internal audits and investigations for nearly a decade of audit leadership. This is where he was able to build the internal audit function and streamline its operations to align with the requirements of the global internal audit standard. Chris is currently the Chief Internal Auditor at CalBank PLC, where he leads multidisciplinary internal audits and investigation functions. Today, Chris is joining us to share practical perspectives on how to drive efficiency and collaboration in audit delivery, drawing in his experiences across diverse industries. So with some virtual claps again, let's welcome Joseph Chris Haruna, who is our second panelist for today.
Thank you very much, Moina, and nice meeting you, Chika. I'm looking forward to a very interactive discussion throughout this period.
All right, thank you, Chris, and thank you, Chika. We are really excited to have you all here today, and this gives us opportunity to draw in and learn from your over decades of experience in internal auditing. Now, today's discussion, we are spanning across different subtopics. So we're looking at how internal audit is driving efficiency in both markets. So for Ghana and Nigeria, we'll also be touching on collaboration across the 3 lines. We also look at resourcing and talent retention, and also what are specific industry challenges that there are within the profession that we both can learn. And we'll also be looking at how internal audits can leverage technology and data analytics to improve its function. So to begin with, our first question will be going to Mr. Joseph Chris, just to get in some perspective in terms of how the internal audit function is actually delivering efficiency, and what does efficiency even mean in terms of audit delivery within the Ghanaian context, and also drawing in from your experiences, where do you think most internal audit teams seem to fall short of, so that other participants on the call today will be able to pick in learnings from there? So this will be specific for the Ghanaian market, and then we'll also hear from Chika in terms of what it is in the Nigerian market. So over to you, Chris. Thank you.
Raina, thank you very much for the question. In the Ghanaian market context, when we are talking about efficiency, I think it goes beyond just simply completing audits quickly. I would want to situate this conversation within the context of the standards, so that we have a criteria by which we can assess what really efficiency means. So if you go through the standard, you realize that the standard has actually pointed out some things that we look out for to measure efficiency. It says that we should be looking at budgeted activity against our actual output in terms of our resource allocations, in terms of timeliness of engagement completion. That would also help you to assess whether you're being efficient or not, and then the degree of the audit plan achievement, and also stakeholder satisfaction surveys can also give you a sense of efficiency. In the Ghanaian context, what we've realized, at least based on my experience in the Ghanaian context, is that in as much as these things are there to help us to measure efficiency, they are not really structured. So we are doing some of them, and some we are not also touching on them to really measure efficiency. I would like to situate that in the context of CalBank PLC. So for us in CalBank PLC, when it comes to efficiency, yes, indeed, we undertake our audit looking at from a budgetary point of view, where we plan, we budget, allocate time to every audit engagement. And we assess the time that we have allocated. If it's an hours, unlike external audit where we want to look at time allocation in terms of hours spent on any audit engagement, we have allocated a specific number of days that we want to spend on an audit engagement. and we assess the budgeted days allocated to the actual to see whether or not we are able to complete our audit within specific timelines. If the audits consistently overshoot the budgeted days, that tells us that there's something amiss. And in terms of our root cause, most often you realize that it could either be as a result of instances where our scopes are not properly defined, the team lacks the right skills to get the work done, issues maybe with the auditees, maybe there are some frictions between the auditor and the auditee that would also affect your ability to complete the work on time. And maybe in terms of we have underestimated the risk associated with the work from the planning stage. Then you go into the field and you realize that things are not what you actually had planned for. So by the time you realize when these things are happening, you realize that what you have budgeted for, they are overruns. You're unable to get the work done, and that throws out inefficiencies. So that is one angle that we look at it from. And this also, I believe, in the Ghanaian context, affects other colleagues in other banks that have actually engaged over time. Also, we will look at it again from the angle of the timelines to deliver the work on the field and report. So when it comes to reporting also, we look at efficiency from reporting. When you are done with an audit and you issue a report after 3-6 months, the report is irrelevant. And that means that you are not being efficient. What would that report serve? Where the board actually is expecting that you bring insight and risks to the attention. By the time you're reporting, management has actually moved away from those risks. So from that angle also, this is an area that affects us in the banking environment here in Ghana that we need to be mindful of and see how best we can address them. We can also look at efficiency from the angle of the entire audit plan, what you have planned for the entire year, and whether or not you've been able to achieve them. So on a quarterly basis, you report to the board and then you show them your quarterly plan against your actual, whether or not you're able to achieve anything. And from that angle also, at the end of the year, you would also want to see whether whatever you said you're going to do for the entire year, were you able to achieve it? It also gives you a sense of whether or not you're being efficient. And I think one important thing that the standard also helps says we should be using to measure efficiency has to do with feedback, survey feedbacks. So with that, what your auditee is telling you would also give you a sense whether or not you're being efficient at the work. So here's a case, you complete an audit and you're getting a lot of negative feedback from the audit. And then some of the questions that you'll be asking whether the audit was done on time, and then those feedbacks, whether satisfactory and whether you gave ample time. So all these things feed into whether or not you're being efficient at the work that you do. I think to top it all up, also the standard access to utilize tools in the course of our work, that is looking at leveraging technology to get the work done efficiently. I must say, in this area, we are all corporates from where I sit in terms of the Ghanaian environment, where, yes, there are tools that are available, but if you ask whether or not we are really utilizing the tools, from ACL to maybe Power BI or IDEA to harvest data, analyze the data, we're actually struggling in that environment. So you realize that our work is still manual. We are relying on sampling instead of being able to do 100% review of any particular area. We are still struggling. And it's not that the tools are not available. Yes, the tools are there, but you realize that there are a lot of challenges when it comes to the application of the tools. Maybe there are legacy projects that have or systems that are already in place as to how to connect these tools to the legacy systems to be able to come out with the analytics that we need to do. You realize that we have a challenge in that area. And also we have another challenge, which would be maybe in terms of the staff strength, competencies to understand what the tools that we have and really utilize them for the work that we want to do to be quite efficient at what we want to do. So in a nutshell, I'll say that the standard has given us this criteria. And then if you are also to follow them, you get a sense of whether or not you're being efficient at your work or otherwise. And then you have to see how best you can design strategies to ensure that you are aligned. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Joseph. You've done so much justice to this particular topic. I see Chika has been nodding throughout the session, so I'd like to hear from her whether there's more to it, there's anything different within the Nigerian context.
Um, Thank you, Ruhania. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Yeah. So just like Joseph said, and you saw me nodding because most of the challenges he shared is also similar because, of course, it's West Africa. So we've got similar landscape. But I think the only thing I'm going to add for us in Nigeria is the increased regulatory expectation and scrutiny in Nigeria. We've got strong and increased regulatory scrutiny in Nigeria, and our regulators are very, very firm on compliance. You would see that we've started having very, very high penalties, on infractions to very, very little things we think are little, but for the regulators. So that engagement with the regulators, it's really very critical for us. And we need to also, like Joseph said, when we are efficient, based on what the standard has given us, right? We need to ensure that we improve our engagements with the regulators. We need to understand what the regulatory expectations for Nigeria. It's the key. What are the major key risks for us? Financial crime, for foreign exchange transactions. Technology, cybersecurity. Even up to conduct, the way we treat our clients. Customer complaint goes to the regulator is fining you. So these things are things we need to be very conscious about as internal auditors. And I would like to speak more around the solutioning. What do I think we need to do to become more efficient? Like Joseph said, it's not about quickly completing an audit, right? What is the outcome of the audits? Are we really adding value? Are we looking at what are the top risks? Do we need to, when we're defining our audit plan for the year, how have we considered proper engagement with the business to understand how to align on what are the key risks or top enterprise risks are in the organization? Those things are important that we align. And when you understand what the top risks are, then you develop audit plans to address those risks and also align it to what the regulators expect, because our regulators want coverage in certain key risk that they see. So we have to take time. Audit planning, risk assessment is critical as internal auditors to take time to do that activity very well. When we do that, we ensure that we come up with audits that addresses this top risk and we pay more attention. And Joseph also mentioned the use of data analytics, so critical. I personally am privileged. I'm working for an international organization. So we've got a lot of global best practices that we do already. So things around data analytics is something, in fact, for every audit in Standard Chartered, you have to ensure that 50% of your review or your checks, whether it's the control design effectiveness check or the operating effectiveness check, has to be done with a data analytics tool or AI tool. We started using AI too. But of course, like you said, the challenge we still have is the adoption, is the acceptance. But the thing is that I think another thing, again, that we need to also address is our mindset, that these tools are not here to take away our jobs, right? Because they are not human, but they are here to just help us augment what we're doing, and we do it smarter and faster. And then on the audit report, I would like to spend more time on the audit report. How can we be efficient in how we deliver our audit report? It's important that when we're delivering our audit report, that we look at top risk. It's not about the volume, right? It's not about the volume, the number of issues you pick. It's about the real, what's the critical control? What is the risk? If you pick an exception, you need to be able to demonstrate or explain what's the business risk or how it impacts the business strategy. So those things are critical. We also need to ensure that we are also looking at it, like you mentioned, on the we get feedback from our auditees, our stakeholders. It's very critical. In SCB, we actually have a tool already that we can use to do that. So after every audit, you're expected to trigger those feedback to the stakeholder. So they are looking at you. They are looking at, have you really added value? Because when we finish an audit, I personally see an audit as a project. When you're done, that control environment needs to be better than what you meant. Right? You need to add more value. So in explaining or in trying to get across to your team, it's important that we provide good outcomes after an audit so that people understand the value that we create as internal audits. I think that's what I would like to add to everything that has been said. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Chika, for your contribution. But let me have right on the back of that to do a follow-up question on what you just said so far in terms of the data analytics and tool. From where you sit, what do you think exactly are the barriers when it comes to leveraging technology and data analytics? Aside the fact that we hear organizations crying about the cost of the tool and getting people to do the training, are there more to it than just that in terms of leveraging technology? Because in the standard and the standard 10.3, it does make mention of the fact that as internal auditors and as heads of audit, we are expected to leverage technology to be able to drive efficiency in internal audit. But here again, we still see a lot of people leveraging on Excel to be able to do the analytics. But I just wanted to know from where you sit, what do you think exactly are the barriers when it comes to leveraging technology and data analytics?
Is that me? Hello?
It,
Okay, all right. So
yes,
we
yes,
missed you.
Chika, that's
Yeah,
you.
we missed
We
you.
It's just
We missed
follow-up
you
we
there.
questions to
missed
the
you.
data analytics.
Yeah.
Okay, so I missed the last part of your question. You were frozen. So if you could just, repeat it so I ensure that I cover everything you're asking.
Right. So let me just take it all over again. So I was
Okay.
saying in terms of data analytics, we still see most organization relying heavily on Excel to do the analytics, but under standard 10.3, there's mention of the fact that as heads of internal audits, it's required that we leverage on technology to be able to drive efficiency. Now, the common challenge that we've had across most organizations in terms of drawing on technology to drive efficiency. It's about the cost factor. So I wanted to find out from where you sit, is there more to it? Are there more barriers that are stopping organizations from leveraging technology and data analytics to drive efficiency within the internal audit function?
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much for that interesting question. So, the truth is that the journey, to the data-driven internal audit function is progressive, right? This is not something that we can do or implement immediately. One of the barriers I see really is around skills. Um, and then at the back of that is also the mindset, right? Skills in terms of here in Africa, I don't know about Ghana, but here in Nigeria, if you look at what our tertiary institutions teach, right, it's more theoretical, right? We do not have those skills taught in schools. So for you to develop those skills, you have to intentionally develop it by yourself. So there is the skill gap, right? Wherein a lot of people do not understand how to utilize these tools. Yes, Excel is not totally bad, right? Just that Excel is kind of limited to what you can do, in terms of having a complete or audit. So that's just what Excel, but it is. I think there's a huge skill gap, and there's also data quality issues, right? Even within my organization, where I look at sometimes it's very difficult getting data, pulling data because we have systems sitting in silos. They don't talk to each other. So you may need data from the system. It's not available. You can't pull it together. So it makes doing those analytics difficult. But we must not give up, right? Because this is actually the future. We need to ensure that we develop the skills, right? I think we can take this in to in terms of transformation. We can do this in 3 stages, right? So the foundation stage, which is ensuring we have good data, right? We ensuring we have consistent processes, right? Where we can automate a process, let's automate, and ensuring that we even understand the interfaces between the systems and develop technology skills. It's critical that we have to. It's something that we have to do. And then organizations now need to intentionally ensure that, people in internal audits are being trained, right? And encouraged to get the certifications that they need and also use the skills. Second is, how do we adopt it? Because the truth is, if we have trained people, in how these tools are being used, then we need to find a way to begin to adopt it in our audits. Like I told you, for us, some of our audits, for instance, if you're going to do an audit around payments, it's all numbers. Nobody's going to want you to begin to select samples We want you to do 100% review, and how you're going to do is that you have to use a data analytics tool, which we already have, right? So, and how do you use it? You need to understand how to use it, because these things, it's garbage in, garbage out, So if you don't know how to use it, it may not be able to support you. So another tool I find very interesting is Microsoft Copilot, right? That is such an intelligent system. But the way I use it personally is that I ask it to give me a prompt, and I tell it, I ask it like you're talking to your assistant, right? On what I need done. This is what I want. This is it. This is how I want it. Give me a prompt, and it gives me a prompt. Then I run the prompt on it, and it helps. And of course, when you're doing these things, you also need to be mindful that sometimes the outcome from AI is not totally correct, right? So it's important. So what it does is that it gives you a first draft to work with, and then you can do your review. So it's all around. For me, I think it's another thing again is mindset shifts. We need to change our mindset and see these tools as enablers to do our jobs to be better, and not it will never take away our jobs, right? Because a data-driven audit is where we should go, so that we can give better assurance and we deliver it at scale. Thank you.
Very well said. Indeed, indeed. The future is AI. So of course it's here to stay. So it's important that we are consistently trying to find how we can embed AI into our delivery to make our job efficient and smooth. And it's important because to be able to understand the audit universe into its entirety, to be able to deliver value to the organizations, it's important that we are addressing all of the key risks that the environment, the business is being exposed to in terms of the risk landscape that the business sits within. Now, in our earlier discussion, I was really excited when we touched on feedback and how it's important to get feedback from our auditees to make us better. Now, we had an encounter with a particular organization, and we got an interesting discovery that when it comes to feedback, Chika, when the auditor sends out feedback to the auditees will only respond after they've seen the audit report. So it means that if the if the audit report comes back and it's bad, then they're just going to have a lot of backlash, a lot of aggressive, a lot of feedbacks that are not even going to be constructive to the auditor. So those are some of the issues that we've had, especially when it comes to feedback. But of course, we do have some constructive feedbacks that do come in that help the organization. So the important thing is how to sieve out the noise and then take out the ones that will actually help the function. Now, on the back of that, would like to look at collaboration in terms of how the internal audit function should collaborate effectively with the other business units. Now, Joseph, this question goes to you. Now, the three-line models calls for strong collaboration among internal audits and other assurance functions. Other assurance functions within the business, we are looking at risk management, internal control, compliance, and operational management. Now, in Ghana, where many organizations are still holding on to the second line, why am I saying this? We get into a business, we see one department, they're doing audits, they're doing control, even risk management sitting with just one department. And from the three-line models, we can clearly see where risk management, internal controls sitting on the second line and internal audits on the third line. Now, given such a structure, which is normal in our organizations today, how can we practically foster collaboration giving resource constraints and clarity when it comes to the mandate, and also riding on the back of standard 9.3 in the new standard, which calls for coordination and reliance, which is a requirement for the CIA to ensure that we are consistently collaborating with the other assurance factors, and the importance on combined assurance. So just from where you said, can you just throw some perspectives on that, how we can practically foster collaboration across the other assurance factors in the organization?
Rahina, thank you very much for the question. Indeed, this particular area, it's one area that, right, as you rightly indicated, the standard requires that we collaborate, and then with this collaborations, it also helps to eliminate inefficiencies. Okay, and then it gives us, it puts us in a better place to really fight any risk and ensure that we have developed better controls to address any risk that the organization is facing. I think in the Ghanaian context, when it comes to the three lines model, we actually understand it very well in theory, but putting it into practice, that is where the problem is. The second line in many organizations indeed are still thin, under-resourced, not clearly differentiated from the first line. And as you rightly indicated, by the time you realize the third line is also being pulled into this complex situation that we find ourselves in. So the internal audit then would risk either filling the gaps, and then we would be at risk of losing our independence if we have this structure in place, or for which is a real thing. You see yourself always conflicted as to where you really sit as internal audit. And you can also decide to, if you want to be strict on following independence, and you also risk ignoring what is there in terms of the controls and leaving the organization exposed. So you realize that you are forced to come into that space and also help to fight any gaps that are there. I would want to situate it in the CalBank context now. In CalBank, what we have done in CalBank, and I'll commend management for that precisely with the MD, we have something what we call the control family. And in terms of this control family, as you rightly indicated, it's a model that brings into practice the combined assurance framework point of view, where you have internal audits, internal control, compliance department, and risk management operating not as silos, but coming together, collaborating to develop controls that address the bank's most significant risk matters. So with this, the power here that we see is in synergy, because we know there are certain gaps. So when a major risk challenge arises, what we do is that you realize that the four departments each would bring about their expertise. We would come together, think through the issues, and then we would profess solutions to fight whatever challenge that we are facing. So you realize that the internal audit department will bring about their independence assurance, internal control will bring process rigors, compliance will bring regulatory perspectives, and then the risk management would also bring the enterprise-wide risk view about that significant gap that we have identified. The result is that our controls are more robust from that approach. We cover the area completely, because everybody will be touching on one side of it, and by the time you realize we are done with it, and then we are able to present a common front in terms of how we've addressed the issue to management, and not to be given conflicting views where you realize that the opinion of internal audit is different from the opinion of internal control. So you realize that you again give some comfort to the system or to management that see, by the combined assurance approach, we are bringing you a solution that would work. So the other aspect for me here, as I mentioned, this concept is being driven by the MD with the term that he calls the control family. So when there's a significant matter, when he's minuting on anything, by the time you realize, right, control family handle, and then it comes, and then you realize that we have to come together to be able to fight whatever situation that we find ourselves in. And this also gives us a sense of the tone at the top, where you realize that top management believes in controls and believes that a combination of all the forces can help the organization get to where it needs to get to. So for us, this is the approach that we use when it comes to dealing with the inefficiencies or the weaknesses that we find in our second and then the 10 line defense. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joseph. I'm happy to hear about how we are driving combined assurance within CalBank. And of course, the Global Internal Audit Standards allows us under Standard 9.5 on coordination and reliance that as internal auditors, yes, we are allowed to rely on the works of the other assurance providers. So just giving an instance where risk management has a risk register, we've identified the risk. Internal audit, we can leverage on what's been done, but of course, we also need to do another review to see that the data that's been provided provided is accurate enough for us to use. So we don't have to waste another set of time to conduct a risk assessment when that has already been conducted by risk management. So then it allows for less time in terms of audit planning and allows us to be able to complete our internal audit plan on time and also on schedule. I just wanted to add on to that. Thank you, Joseph, for that. Now, Chika, we've said consistently, I'm sure throughout this webinars, about how the internal audit function has evolved from just being, compliance checkers, being policemen, to where we are saying that we are standing in as strategic partners to help organizations to achieve their objective. Now, we want to look at it from your lens, how internal audit function should be able to build credibility and executive buying. How can we, from your experience, we want to understand what has changed and what still needs to change for the internal audit to be consistently valued by executive leadership and boards. For most organizations, usually we use the internal audit month, which we are currently in, to speak to various process owners, to let them understand that we are not here to catch you, we are not here to witch hunt, but we are here to serve as strategic partners, just to have that kind of mind shift from where we started from as a traditional auditor to the modern day auditor, to say that we are standing in as strategic value partners. So we wanted to get your perspective on what has changed over the years in terms of the audit function and what still needs to be done for us to be seen as strategic value partners than just compliance tick box checkers.
Yeah, thank you, Ruhania. This is what you just said. It's one of my favorite phrases when I'm engaging stakeholders to say, look, I'm your strategic partner. I'm not here to pick exceptions, right? In my view, I think what has changed is significantly is expectations, right? Expectations from the regulators, expectations from the board on the kind of value internal audit should have. And if I dial back 20 years ago, when I started my career, when I finished my youth service, I joined actually internal audits, but in a manufacturing firm. And those days, auditors were feared and not valued. There are two different things. When you're feared, and not valued. It's something that we must change, and it is changing. Because the expectation now is that we need to come with forward-looking insights, right? Particularly around emerging risk. What's going on? When we engage, we need to look at engage. Our engagement style needs to change, right? And it is changed in some aspects. I know we still need to do more, because the truth is that in everything we do, deliberate improvement is something we need to work on. Has it changed from those days where an auditor is coming, there's an audit coming, and people are so scared? It has, but is that fear or is that anxiety still there? I think it's still there a bit, right? Just if you agree with me, it's still there a bit, because I think organizations,
I do.
what I think has happened is that organizations take the outcome of audits, especially when it's not a good outcome, to penalize process owners, right? I think we need to shift that mindset of when something is wrong or something goes wrong or something is picked. Let's move towards solutioning and let's look at what is the root cause. Is the reason because of clear negligence, or is the reason because that process is a manual process, right? So we need to continuously evaluate what we think, evaluate how we approach these things, right? And so if organizations do not begin to hold process owners accountable, I'm not saying you shouldn't hold them accountable. There's a place where everyone needs to be accountable and be disciplined about what you need to do. But if the outcome is, hey, you're going to be dead if you have any audit outcome, then you find out that people will still have that fear factor when it comes to audits. Audit should be looked as an opportunity to improve the control environment, not to find faults, right? And then what Joseph talked about collaboration is so critical when it comes to audit delivery, right? You're doing an audit. We need to have the mindset that we are collaborating with our auditors to make that process better. When we have that mindset, we need to ensure that we listen. I think I said it before. When we want to find gaps, it's not. We shouldn't. We should also ensure that audit is about what is the outcome. It's not about the number of findings. That shouldn't be critical or KPI for auditors, right? It should be the value, the quality that you're bringing, the quality of the of the gap you're picking. For instance, when we do walkthroughs, right? When we want to understand the process, because you have to understand the process before you're able to add value. And when you're engaging your and the process owner, you should engage to understand what the controls are, not what exactly is written. Now, gets my point. My point is that we should ensure that our DOIs, as our Department Operating Instruction, our policies, is in line with what we are doing. But sometimes things could change along the way, and people have changed a few things. The question is, what is being done? What is the control that is being executed? Does it mitigate that risk? If it does, then we are fine. Then we can go back up to say, oh, this is what you do. You do A step A, B, C, but what you've written is D, E, F. Please, can you align this? And there's a reason for why you need to align this. You need to align this because when you leave the desk or when you hand over to somebody else, then there's not going to be some reference point for how the controls are being executed. So for every engagement, right, that we have, or we have an opportunity to interact with people, interact with our stakeholders, we have to ensure that we are linking findings to what are the risks. What is that risk? What's that major risk? Not about the find, because if you have a finding and you cannot articulate or think about what the risks are, it's not value, right? And then another critical thing we need to do is our level of engagement with stakeholders. We do not have to wait for a real audit. I like what you guys are doing in Calback. In Standard Chartered, it's exactly the same. The 3 lines of defense are well defined, like because we're a global organization, so it's well defined. We understand where we stand. And then we usually have governance meetings where everyone sits and we review what's going on. Aside from that, internal auditors, we should also engage businesses. We should have business monitoring meetings where we are engaging people to understand what's going on. What are the issues? What are the emerging issues, right? And then how can we give board, because it's important that we're able to give our board the kind of assurance that they require, the assurance that, control environment is working, or these are the gaps, these are the things we need to do to ensure the control environment is, acceptable, So it's about helping management, right, making better decisions, not just we shouldn't just focus on only identifying gaps, right? And then the last thing I would like to leave is that even when we're doing our reviews, right, with auditors, and you find a redundant control, a control that does not add any value, we can also profile solution recommendation that why are we doing this control? If we have to, we can do. If the control that can be executed, for instance, monthly, and it's been executed weekly, for instance, why is it done? What's the risk? What is it mitigating? We can also recommend that those things should be removed because the redundant control, and we save more time. So these are the things we need to begin to think as auditors, and not just going in with a checklist and going through the checklist, finding exceptions and going. Then when it comes to action plans, right? We also need to, we of course, we have to maintain our independence in terms of action plans, but it's important that we support in how those action plans are developed to ensure that those action plans are addressing the root causes of the gap, right? Yeah.
Chiga, thank you. And I'm really excited we are having this discussion. Like, it will marvel you that even within the internal audit function, you will find audit leads asking the junior auditors, when you come back without enough findings, they tell you to go back. I heard that story and I was really surprised. And I'm like, we are supposed to be ambassadors of change. So what exactly are we doing if we are not putting our house in order? The guy told me he performed his audit. There was the working papers properly documented. He came back and then his audit lead told him that no, there's no way you can't come back with just 2 findings. You have to go back and bring me more findings. So if as auditors we are even putting on this cap, then how exactly do we want our process owners to view us? Because of course they're going to view us as policemen, because then you come in and you are looking for document A, it's not there, immediately you want to write as a finding. And I even have a similar experience to, we went to conduct an audit. Usually for the working papers, we refer to it as working papers. So in our checklist, we're looking for a working paper. And the auditee told us they didn't have an audit, a work paper. Upon probing further, we got to realize that it was just a name difference. They call it as worksheets and we're referring to it as working papers. But if we had just picked it up as a finding, rushing to report it, you come back and then during the exit meeting, all of these things are coming out, and then
And
even management begin to doubt you as an
you as
auditor,
your
right? What
credibility.
exactly?
Yes. Yeah.
Exactly. So I'm
Yeah.
really happy that we are having these discussions today that would throw more light to some of these issues. Thank you.
Right, and Chika,
Yeah.
just to add to that also, I think this aspect of finding observation by hook or crook, I think what it does also is that it kind of erodes the audit quality. By the time you realize, especially as the head, you are seated and then observations are brought to you and you look at the nature of the observations and you realize that these lack quality, they lack depth. And
Yeah.
also it creates a sense in the minds of the auditee that you are witch hunting them.
Yes.
Yes, because what is the criteria? You're supposed to assess or perform your audit based on a certain criteria. And then you go in and then you realize that because you have to bring an observation, somebody is raising observations that are outside the criteria.
Scope.
And then you realize that what is happening here? And then by the time you're getting feedback, verbal feedbacks, written feedbacks from auditees, and then they are suggesting that your team is trying to witch hunt us, finding things that are not there and stuff like that. So I think we need to really look at that area. But one more point also, Rihanna, you said something about the practical example you gave where a team lead was asking somebody to go back and find something. I asked myself, how did the planning exercise go? What did you plan during the planning stage, such that you now have to send somebody back to go and find something? At the planning stage, when you're developing your working program, what did you scope in? What did you scope out? What are the objectives of the particular audit? So when the person is going back, what is the objective now? Is it to go and improve the process or now to go and find an observation to witch hunt someone? What becomes the objective of that particular audit?
The truth is that, Joseph, the truth is, if I may, the truth is that in the past, in those days, right, an auditor is viewed as being a great auditor if you find a lot of findings.
Yes.
But that mindset has to change. And you find that with a lot of people who have been auditors for such a long time, right? So that mindset has to change, because the truth is that at the end of the day, if you find an observation, what you should always, like you said, what you should always ask yourself is, what is the risk? What can go wrong if this is not fixed? If you can't answer that question, then it means it's not quality. Right now, we do audits and sometimes we just have housekeeping. I call it housekeeping. These are housekeeping issues. You still write it and let them do it, because if it's not done, maybe progressively, when we scale the process, we could, and you could have those kind of conversations where you're thinking. In fact, in Standard Chartered, right, we've moved from rule. I'm sorry, I'm digressing, but I think it's important we discuss this. We've pivoted from rule-based methodology to a principle-based methodology. And if you look at the IIA standards, you see that that is also written in terms of principle-based, where it's telling you this is the requirement. Then these are the consideration. Now, consideration means it's a consideration. It's not compulsory that you must do it this way.
Yeah.
Well, look at the outcome. This is the requirement. This is what, and so tell us how you are meeting this requirement. And that's the kind of mindset we should have in an audit. How are you meeting this requirements? What are the evidences to show that you're meeting this requirements? Once that can be provided, then look at it. Use this beautiful brain that God has given us and think through it, right? And so for me, like, if when I'm leading an audit and you come and give me, that's the first one, I said, please, what's the risk? If you can't provide the risk, then sorry, it's not quality. And we must not do for you. We have audits that are satisfactory, and like you said, Joseph, we have a coverage plan. We said this is A, B, C we are covering. So when in your report, you're also reporting in terms of this coverage. You're not saying everything is. You're not giving you're giving a reasonable assurance based on the audit coverage. So be have that confidence to say, based on this coverage, based on the work I've done, I have no exceptions, or I have an exception. This is the management action plan. This is what we need to do. This is the timeline. This is when we need to close. So once we do that, and and like we said, not everyone, some people will still say, oh, because the outcome wasn't the outcome they were expecting, but you know that you've reasonably done a quality job, and you have demonstrated that how you've delivered the audits, and you'll be fine, and you move on.
Yeah. Just to chip in a little bit also, I've actually had an experience, and I think I still do, where you write an entire audit report and it's full of positive comments. So to buttress the point of satisfactory. So you would, when there are no adverse findings, you are I think you have room to also describe the processes that you went through and comments about how they are doing it so well. So that is also accepted. And with that, you realize that you improve your relationship with the auditee, and not that you are always there to come and find something wrong in their space. You can also commend them to management that, see, in this particular area, they are doing it so well and they need to be commended. And the standard actually gives room for that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chika and Chris. And then you get to see that it makes life simple for us as auditors. Once we collaborate with them, we take them through, let them understand what the issues are. They will quickly, implement the recommendations that we give. And you tend to have less confrontations at exit meetings, because we've already taken them through, we've understood everything. So once we are having our exit meetings, it becomes much less simple and less confrontational. I've witnessed an exit meeting that was a story for another day. But of course, you still find some process owners that are just so difficult, no matter what you do with them. Exit meetings will always be a big issue.
Of course. There are people that would want you to turn a blind eye. Oh no, but sorry, this my, so there are people like that. You can't do anything about it. You state because everything we do is that it is evidence-based, right? We have the evidence, we show the evidence, we communicate the evidence. And that is it. We are not there to always please everyone. That's something we need to understand.
And just to add to that, when in those close-up meetings, when you realize that the auditee has taken those entrenched positions, I think sometimes what I do is that, see, we are just draining ourselves with a back and forth. You document why you think that observation is not what it is, and equally,
and give me the evidence too.
Yes.
I'll give you the evidence. We'll be fine.
Yes.
I think another thing we need to do as internal auditors is also our language, right? The way we communicate is very important. I say, for me, a successful internal auditor is someone who can communicate clearly, not speak big English, communicates clearly. Because when you don't communicate very clearly, it becomes an issue. Just like what you said exactly. You see that thing you said about differences in nomenclature, right? Some auditor in your mind will just say, I found a gap. And then close out meeting, you're looking like someone that does not have any sense, because you should have asked another question, just one more question or probe, then you would get the responses that you need, So I think clear communication is something I would personally hire someone to join my team who may not actually be an accountant or finance person, but the person is curious, right? The person has the ability to learn, right? And so that's how we can increase the talent pool. And right now that we are pivoting into AI, data analytics, having someone that is a chartered accountant and all those things and does not understand AI in IT is not going to be very helpful if you're looking at the future of audit. So we also need our regulators to begin to look at the competency framework around audits, right? We have to be open to look at how we begin to apply skill-based, and not necessarily someone has done audits for 10 years or 15 years. It doesn't work. It has to be someone who has that ability, who has that human skills, and who has the ability to learn very fast and is very, very skeptical and curious. That person will be a good auditor.
Yes,
I just want to chip that in.
I don't know if you've had this experience before, but for me, I've actually had an experience where I had to go and apologize to the auditee. because of the quality of the audit findings. And it's not a good place to be. Yeah.
Well, in our own case, we operate as a global organization. So we have one global audit team. I sit here in Nigeria looking after audits for Nigeria, but for every audit report that comes out, it doesn't sit, the review doesn't just happen here in Nigeria. So it goes, different levels. People look at it. So those scrutiny happen. So it's really very, very slim to find an audit that is that won't have that quality. Of course, if you do something that doesn't have quality, then it means that your seniors across the chain already knows that, hey, this person not good enough. But what goes to our auditees at the end of the day is something that would have gone through various eyes, various review before it's finally published. So we have less of that, but I think in a local setting that could also happen. Yes, that could also happen.
Well said. A lot of discussions around collaboration and then, fostering networking, collaboration, making see that we actually going into detail. That's why the IIA has a whole standard on professional skepticism, to make sure that as auditors we are putting on our curiosity mindset, probing further, having evidence that's reliable, sufficient, and relevant for us to be able to come to a conclusion. And it's important as auditors for us to have certain key soft skills, especially communication skills, as Chika mentioned, and also emotional intelligence, how we dealing with the emotions of the process owners. Now, on the back of that, Joseph, we know one of the frustrations that internal auditors face has to do with implementation of recommendations, and we've touched a bit on how we can drive that, where the auditees are part of the process. We are walking them through the entire process, giving them consistent update. So at the end of the day, once we issue our recommendations, then they understand why, first of all, why we are issuing that recommendation. What does the recommendation seek to do, and what gaps are we seeking to close? What risk are we seeking to close by the implementation of the recommendations that we've given? From where you sit, what strategies have you found as most effective in ensuring that management close their recommendations on time? Because you get to see the trackers, you have over 100 days outstanding of implementations that are yet to close. So let's hear from you on that.
Okay. Thank you very much. With this particular area, I think I would want to look at some of the root causes of these things. So you might want to, one of it actually has to do with where the recommendations are not practical. So it creates this problem for you, where you realize that, okay, you're having long overdue close out of observations because what you are recommending that the auditee should do is really not practical for it to be done. And also where the ownership is not clear. And for this, I think I've actually had experiences of seeing audit reports being written and recommendations that with management should do this. And I ask myself, who is management? You have not identified who has to address this particular gap. Who is management here? Should the MD come all the way down to come and address the gap that you have identified? So in as much as it is in a particular department, you realize that you've not clearly defined who has to do what. So the recommendations should really capture who has to do what, so that when it comes to accountability, we can hold somebody accountable for those areas. And so these are some of the root causes that create these problems for us. And I think one of the ways we can address this has to do with really coming out recommendations when you're working with the auditee to design whatever action that has to be taken. That would make it even much more practical, where either in a closeout meeting or sometimes audit approaches where before closeout meetings, you draw the auditee's attention to observations that you've raised. And then you can think through the observation with the auditee. And I think Chika said something. What is the risk here? So if you're raising something and you're unable to explain the risk to the auditee, how would the auditee buy in this recommendation? So if the auditee is able to understand the observation, understand the risks associated with the observation, then you can work together to come out with a recommendation that the auditee can easily implement. And you can think through it as to the timelines when these observations can be closed out. So I think it's a very important thing to note, to be able to address these cases where we are having recommendations that are not being closed out. And I think one other thing too has to do with making sure that you have a mechanism to track your observations or your recommendations. And I think one thing when I joined CalBank, I realized that it's been done here, and I think it's good. It's the CalBank operates with a concept that sees internal control as a management, really, and it is what it is. It's a management function. Therefore, in this case, if I use management sees this internal control function as those who would help them close out any recommendations that are coming from audit. Therefore, management expects that audit observations are equally tracked by internal control to ensure that they are closed out. But I know the standard also places a responsibility on the internal auditor to make sure that they are followed through their audit observations and recommendations to ensure that they are closed out. So here you realize that while the fight is on two fronts, the internal auditor is pushing to ensure that audit observations are closed. Internal control is equally pushing as a management tool to ensure that the observations are closed. So this is what we do here in CalBank to ensure that we are able to bridge this gap where we raise observations and then they are not closed and they are pending for a very long time. And then you report these at management level and then at the board level. And I think there's also one aspect about it for us. There is an appraisal component in there, both for the internal auditor and then internal control. Let's see, it is not about raising observations. It's about ensuring that they are closed out. Therefore, you're also equally measured by the rate of resolution. So you can't be raising a lot of observations and just leaving them in the system. So you are equally measured by that, where the rate of resolution is supposed to be about 90% or 95% before the next audit cycle begins, and before the next board meeting, and then before appraisal, when everything is completed. You realize that you yourself, in terms of the auditor or the internal control person, you know your where you are when it comes to appraisal, because you are not able to close out audit observations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joseph. Chika, do you have any more to add to that before I come in?
Yeah. Just wanted to say, I think Joseph has really presented it very beautifully, tracking observations. Because when you're providing your reports to the board, you're also tracking issues and how it's been closed, and that is closed within timeline, and there are no overdue issues. I think one thing that we do very well in is one thing that can help is, of course, using an audit tool to help us. So you can imagine if you have an audit tool where those issues you have raised are updated for you as your issues. You as the auditor is your issue. You would be proactive in engaging, the person responsible to get feedback on where they are on these issues. And so because you're supposed to, and if you now put it as like you said, as your appraisal, where you have to provide an update in the audit tool, like a monthly update of what's going on, the stage, the completion, and all. And when we do that, you say that way we will work towards ensuring that issues are closed within timelines. I think that's all I would want to add. The use of technology in helping us to drive and become more efficient in issue management. Yes.
All right, thank you, Chika and Joseph. Now, when we flip it to the other side as a process owner, just imagine that I'm a process owner. I'm not involved in the entire process. I don't know what's happening. Audit comes in, gives me a recommendation that's not feasible enough, with timelines that are unrealistic. As a process owner, it becomes difficult to implement these recommendations. And those are some of the pain points that we've heard from process owners about the feasibility of the recommendations that are giving one. The timelines that are even given to close out some of these issues is a challenge for them. So that's why the standard requires that as internal auditors, yes, we have gone onto the field, we've done the work, we've seen the issues, their recommendations, but let's sit with the process owners, let's understand them. How can we effectively implement these recommendations recommendations, because at the end of the day, they are going to implement their recommendations. So from where they sit, if it's not feasible enough, then of course there are going to be delays in terms of implementation. And as Joseph, you rightly said, our job is only done when what our recommendation is implemented, because a recommendation is stemming from a root cause that have been identified. So what we are doing at the end of the day as auditors is, how can we strengthen the risk management process? How can we improve the control process and also the governance structures within the business, right? So it's important that as we are giving out these recommendations to the process owners, let's sit down with them, because if they understand the process better, they will be able to give out recommendations that you might not be looking at it from one end, but they can even draw your attention. I think let's do it this way, or let's do it that way. And then once they are involved in the process, it's easier for them to even understand why they are implementing this recommendation. Because if I'm to implement something and I don't understand the reason why I'm doing it, or what's the end goal of doing it, would happen to the organization, then there will be delays in the implementation. Because let's also remember that the process owners also have their BAUs that they are being marked against. They have their own KPIs that at the end of the day, that's what they're going to be used to measure them. And of course, the implementation of the recommendation as auditors is also our KPIs in a way. So it's important that we collaborate with the process owners. And then once we are able to have that effective collaboration, our work becomes easier. Unlike just dumping the recommendation on them and expecting them to implement what we have given to them. So it's exciting that we are, having a common view on what can be done to ensure that our recommendations are implemented effectively. And also, it's important to have timelines to it. You pick a recommendation, there's no accountable person, there's no timeline, then of course at the process on it means I can take a whole year or 2 years to implement the recommendation as and when I want it. So it depends on how we write it, and then how we also communicate it to them. It's very important, as
So
we've said.
if I may add, just to tie in everything you said, I think all this work should be well articulated before we issue the audit report. Like you said, if there is a remediation that should be done, right? It's important for us in Standard Chartered. The management action plans, that's the recommend, comes from the auditee. So what we do as internal audit is that we now look at what the actions are in terms of what the root cause, to see, okay, does this really address this risk? And if it doesn't, then we can go back to say, hey, you have not looked at ABC. Can you look at this? We think A, what do you think? So at the end of the day, whatever that is coming through as a remediation plan, or what we call management action plan, is coming from the auditors with support and collaboration from us. So we are not there. We don't come and say, oh, do it ABC. No, that's not how we work. At least in Standard Chartered, I can tell you, that's not what we do. What we do is we say, these are the risks, these are the issues. Please come up with the remediation plan. And they come up with a plan. Then we have to look at the plan to say, oh, is it going to address this risk? If it's not, have you looked at A? So it's at the end of the day, because someone has to be an accountable party. And an accountable party has to be somebody very senior, someone that has it's senior and can make decisions within the organization. And that's how we track it. And so when you do that way, and then when it comes to the timeline, it's also critical that the timeline is reasonable. Right? So you don't give a timeline that wouldn't work. For instance, if it's something that has to do with an automation, then you have to consider, how long is it going to take to do this automation, So a lot of things has to go. And at the end of the day, centered around the theme of this conversation, which is collaboration, engagement, communication. Once we do that very well, I think we'll be fine, and we'll keep improving as internal auditors.
And Chika, just to add to this, and this will be from my past life with some of subsidiary audits that I've engaged in, and then you make recommendations, and then the response from the auditee comes well noted. Those kind of, it tells you that, see, the auditee does not believe in the observation, does not believe in your recommendation. So you would have that sitting on your tracker for a very long time with such a response like well noted for implementation, and then that is it. And you realize that there's that disconnect. So just to bring that aspect also up for the audience to note.
Yeah, very true. Very true, Joseph. Now, see, Joseph, Chika, you won't believe it, but growing up, I wanted to be a doctor. But today, I found myself here as an auditor. Now, what was driving that? Why did I even want to become a doctor and not an auditor? So I used to do an internship. I used to see how the internal auditor used to operate. He was just a policeman. People feared him, like feared him. So not just like they feared him and the title. Now, as you said, that mind shift is still going to take a while before people begin not to see internal auditors as policemen, but rather as strategic value partners to organization to say to it that how are we supporting organizations to achieve their objectives, right? Now, there's been a rising concern, and I want to believe it comes off from both jurisdictions, I mean, Ghana and Nigeria, that has to do with talent, how the internal audit profession is consistently losing talent, and how experienced auditors are on a day-to-day basis transitioning to other organizations, of course, that are offering more salaries and better conditions of service. Now, this question will be to both of you. How have you been able to structure your team to deliver efficiently despite this reality that is on the ground? And what does a sustainable talent model for internal auditors look like? Because according to the standard, when we look at Standard 10.2, it requires that as a CAE, we are expected to be able to recruit, retain, and develop talent within the internal audit function. So, from where you both said, how are we doing that to maintain the talent that we have to enable us to achieve our mandates as internal auditors? So, Chike, you can come up first, and then Joseph, you can chip in. Or Joseph, you're muted already.
Like Chika should take the ladies first.
Okay. See, the truth is this, right? Talent retention, not just only internal audit, generally is a concern. I'm sure if you ask any HR professional, what's one of your people risk, they'll tell you retention, right? It's a real risk, and it's something that we have to keep working on. Yeah, we have a growing for Nigeria. We've got, I think we've got a very robust or rich um, um, group of people who have finance and accounting background. However, there's also the need to ensure that as an organization that we look at our value proposition, because everything is not about money. People will keep moving for better opportunities in terms of salaries. But I know for sure, because of my own experience, I've been in Standard Chartered for 19 years now, in just one place, right? But it's not about, I think everybody knows what their purpose is. And so one thing we do very well here is that we've got a very, very robust value proposition, which is what organizations should begin to look at. In terms of attracting and retaining talents, we also have to look at the generational impacts. Right now we are, at least me, I know I'm a millennial. Joseph, I don't know, I think he's also a millennial. We have to now look through Gen Zs. What is a good working environment would be for the next generation? Because in 10 years, hey, I don't think I'll be here anymore, or even less than that. So how do we create a healthy pipeline for internal audit, and how do we ensure we have a high performing team? So I think number one is learning. As internal auditors, we've got to ensure that we are reskilling, upskilling our team. It's important that they learn, and learning can be done in several ways: classroom learning, certifications, also exposure to work. So, for instance, like I always say, I'm privileged. I'm working for a global organization, so I would want to have audits. So we have an opportunity to do audits for in Hong Kong. So that way, I'm learning what's happening in Hong Kong in the process I'm doing. So those kind of exposure would help also to retain. Now, in a local setting, I would say have the flexible in creating a rotation within the team. So people should not be doing the same thing again and again. That can also be very, very, you know, taxing and repetitive. So people should have opportunity to do diverse audits, diverse assignments, and then it has to be clear what is the KPI, what is the socks, what is socks, what does success look like to move to the next level? Because if there are no growth opportunities also in the organization, hey, why would I be there? Why wouldn't I leave? So these are the things that we do. I do, which is around learning, growth opportunities, and sometimes growth opportunities can also be in expansion of role, even if you're not growing to the next level. Expansion, giving the person more authority, right? Trusting people. So there's key soft skills that we need to develop, right? And of course, very important, I say it again, invest in technology skills. We have to create auditors that understand how to use those technology skills. If we don't do that, we're going to be left behind. Because if you see how things are moving, it is important that we need to develop and reskill, and of course, try and pay better. Try and pay better.
Yes.
Don't be the worst in your environment, right? You can't just be the least paying. Try. I'm not saying you exceptionally have to. If you can be the best paying, well, that's good. You're making the money. Is it enough? But don't be the least paid, so that people don't just come and use your organization to learn and move on. I would want to hear what Joseph has to say.
Yes, I think I just want to add to it. Everything you've said is right. And then whilst you're speaking, I was just thinking about this quote that people leave organizations sometimes not because they don't love their job, but they leave organizations because of bad leadership. And you rightly indicated that the kind of people that are coming up that we're working with now, these are the Gen Zs. The way they work is different. You would have instances where somebody will tell you that you're giving me pressure. And I've had instances where people have quit their jobs, and not because they're moving to a new job. They are just going to sit home because they don't understand why you want to control my life. And that is actually also at the workplace. You're working with young people who want to explore, and you as a leader, you are micromanaging them. You are not letting them, you can see that this person has a desire, enjoys what they're doing. And here's the case, you are old school and you are imposing your old school on the new school, and this person is feeling suffocated. He's unable to deliver on the work. I've actually experienced where somebody has quit a job and went to sit home because of a boss. So we need to be able to balance and manage the resources that we have. I have one gentleman that I'm working with in my IT space, and he tells me that if he got a job with a regulator, he's not going to move to the regulator. Do you know why? He says that, with these IT guys, they like to explore. You give him room for him to do what he wants to do. For the purposes of the work, he's doing these analytics for you, and then he's enjoying it. And such a person feels like I'm home. I'm enjoying what I'm doing and I'm still delivering. And you give the person room. Yes, you would have to have boundaries. And this person really is enjoying and would want to stay with you, to work for you any day, and to even attract more talent, because you tell his other colleagues that, see, there's this boss that when you're working with gives you room for you to be. And this concept of work and happiness, there are certain times when it shouldn't always be about the work. Give them room. Let them feel a little bit relaxed. Go out with them. This is all part of the retention strategy to retain your staff, because somebody could be high earned in terms of salary wise. For me, I can tell you any day my experience when I was working in PwC. Yes, the pay was good, but anybody who worked, I think Ruhana would also tell you, the pressure from the top 4 audit firms is so much that on a Sunday evening, you dread going to work on a Monday morning. So this working environment, the least opportunity the person gets will step out of such an environment. So the way we treat them also matters. So just to add to what Chika has said, we need to know how to manage these young ones that are very good at what they do and to want to work for us.
Okay, so just to thank you for bringing that up about Gen Zs, who they always complain about, oh, my mental well-being, oh, my mental,
Yes.
oh, this, So the truth is that the way when we started our own career, the way we worked under pressure, it's not the same way they don't want to be. In
Yeah.
fact, my kids, I have an 18, 14-year-old. Like I see them simple task. I see them, oh, mommy, do I have to do this way? They ask a lot of questions. Why do they have to do this? Right? So we just have to be open to see how we are inclusive as
Yes.
leaders, like he mentioned. And I think one thing, I don't know what your organization is thinking about it, is sometimes these Gen Zs, they want a hybrid kind of work where I want to work this time of the day. I want to, so these things we have to start thinking about
Yes.
it. We're not doing
Yeah.
it yet,
Yeah.
but we have to start thinking about it if we're going to be thinking about, sustainability and the future.
And I bet you if we had an unemployment package in Africa as a developing country, I'm sure most of these Gen Zs would have just quit their work and then sit in the house and go and claim uh, uh, unemployment benefits.
Very true. Very true. Because the new generation, they don't like toxic environment, no
Yes,
stress. Allow
no
me,
stress.
let me run it, my show. But at the end of the day, I'm going to deliver. So,
Yeah,
and the concern is I spend more than like 24 hours, I spend about 8 hours of it straight in the office. So if I'm coming to work and I'm not happy about it, then why should a person continue to live such a life? Those are one of the concerns that we get to hear from some of these Gen Zs, and they are the next future for the workforce. So it's important, as Chika said, we are also trying to understand also from their point of view in terms of how work life should look like. Now we're going to move straight into sector specific collaboration challenges in terms of how we are collaborating with the regulator, and then we'll wrap it up with forward-looking questions in terms of what the function is looking like into the future for internal auditors. So just from what you said, I know there's been a number of regulations, from the Bank of Ghana, since they are currently our regulators. But what kind of distinctive collaboration challenges exist in terms of the internal audit function, and how are we able to balance the regulatory expectations with the internal audit mandate? You get in some organizations, there's no internal audit function because of how people lack to see the value of internal auditors. So we just want to understand what kind of collaboration challenges exist for the internal audit function and how we are balancing it with regulatory expectations.
okay. So, Raina, you rightly indicated uh, that in some organizations, maybe they are not having a regulator. So for them, they kind of struggle. I think the beauty of the environment in which we are working is that you have a regulator who has put in place directives that really empowers the internal audit. From the corporate governance directive, you really see what the regulator is pointing out. Internal audit must be in place. Management cannot really interfere with the internal audit work. So from that angle is good. But from the collaborative point of view, you realize that there's an expectation from the regulator. And because these regulations more or less also empower the internal auditor, you realize that when it comes to mandates, you would want to be doing things that would please the regulator. You're looking at regulations. Chika said in the Nigerian environment, regulation is big. CBN is big on a lot of things. And when they are knocking on your door, you are shivering because by the time you realize you are fined. So the regulatory environment in terms of planning of audit, you realize that you want to satisfy them, make sure that you have your regulatory checklist in place, making sure that everything is set, and that there's no fine. And by the time you realize your MD is on your neck, how come you did not see this? How come the regulator has picked on this? And when the fines are coming, they debit your account and then it follows with a letter. No matter what you do, it's gone. And then from the space we are working in now, given other regulations, you realize that you're supposed to disclose these sanctions and fines on your financial statements, and it's a whole messy thing that you wouldn't want to be involved in. So in one breath, the regulator is there, empowers you. You see some regulatory risks, so therefore you want to put regulatory checklists in place to make sure that they are satisfied. But there's also another aspect. There's that aspect about a risk that the organization you're working in is exposed to. So where to draw the balance in terms of collaboration to have that regulatory aspect, and then you have something that also satisfies the risk that the organization itself has identified and is trying to make sure that they don't crystallize. So that's where the bone of contention comes in. But with that realization, you realize that you are able to put something in place for the regulator to satisfy that aspect, and then also to look at other risk indicators. And one thing I've realized in recent times is it seems even organizations, in as much as we have the risk management framework or function, is also tilting towards this aspect of the regulator, because see, nobody wants to be fined. Nobody wants to be fined. And all of us are moving in that direction, making sure that everything is fine in that way. And then we might lose track of other risk that we are exposed to. So the planning at that planning stage is very important to make sure that you are satisfying all regulatory requirements, and then you're also looking at other risk and taking into consideration. And even at the board level, I must say, yes, the board is also mindful about that. So practically, you realize that we are skewed towards our regulatory checklists much more than looking at other risk areas. I don't know what if Chika has anything to add to that.
Absolutely spot on. So here we call it regulatory obligation. So I've seen, if you look at our typical audit plan, you see that about 80% of it is due to regulatory obligations, because the regulators have said, I want you to cover this area, right? But I think that's a real challenge, and it's also a global challenge, I must tell you. But I think what we can do is the kind of quality engagement we're having with regulators. We, even including myself, I'm telling myself too, yeah, how many times have we engaged regulators so that we begin to tell them those horizon risks that we are seeing in organizations, which they have not put down in a regulation, because maybe something happened 10 years ago, and the landscape, the risk landscape is changing. It's changing. So 10 years ago, this might be a challenge. But now, what's the challenge? What challenge are we seeing in our environment? So how do we proactively have quality engagement with regulators so that we align regulatory obligation and our risk risk expectations, so that as we are meeting regulatory obligations, we're also meeting our own top enterprise risk. I think that's the key role we need to do, both as head of audits, as an association of chief auditors within our environment. I think these are the things we need to push to address. And just to add on to everything that Joseph said. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Chika and Chris. I really resonate when it comes to regulations in Nigeria, where, for the IIA, Standard 8.4 requires of us to perform the external quality assessment. And the regulator is big. Yes, it's a best practice that should be done at least once every 5 years. But the regulator has gone forward to say that, no, I need it done every year. All right. So every year we are having external parties come in. Let's check what internal audit is doing, because if an organization should fail, there's also going to be some form of blame from audit. Because if we are not doing our role well, if we are not identifying the risks, mitigating it, then an organization is most likely to fail. So once every year, external quality assessment is being conducted for the internal audit function. All right. But of course, we are beginning to see indications where BOGs begin to pick up on some organizations that are actually not conducting it. So I'm sure we'll get there.
Yeah.
We'll get there soon. Now, just to look at it from a forward-looking perspective, Chika, I would like to hear from you first. What do you think is one of the most single important investment that we need to do for the internal audit function, looking at it from, in the next 3 years, what can we do to transform the function? What can we do to, transform how we want our process owners to view us, to be able to form and forge meaningful collaboration to support the activities of the internal audit function. And then we'll also hear from you, Chris, and we'll bring the questions to an end, and then we check into the chat box to pick up questions that some of our participants have. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll just wrap this up real quick so that we can have conversations with the participants before the time. So, I think it's all we've been discussing. There are huge opportunities, right? And one of for me, the enablers, for the future opportunities are the people. That's the internal audit staff and technology. It's important that we deploy technology as much as possible for our audit so that we have continuous audits, and be able to have review, a larger population and give a stronger assurance to stakeholders. Because today, a lot of things we do, it's sample based, right? And sometimes it could be 20%, 30%, or even 10% of the sample, depending. But if we can embrace automation and do more continuous review, so you have that tool that will just scan, pick up files and scan and come up with issues very quickly, or identify gaps quite quickly. If we can do that, especially with technology, and then train the people to understand and how to utilize those technological tools, it's critical. I think for me that's the critical biggest opportunity I see for internal audits in Nigeria.
Okay. So, Chika, I agree with you perfectly on what you're saying. And if you look at where the world is moving to, the AI is big. And for me, I can speak for myself in terms of my transition from Guarantee Trust Bank to Carl Bank, and stepping into a role that you have to hit the ground running. And at a point in time where you'd equally have to understand the business and still be moving, and the team you also have, you're now building the team up in a certain way to work with them. And I realized that the use of AI really helped, even though I've been using it in time past, helped me bridge my work, like 50% of the work done, especially when it comes to risk assessment. With the prompts, it helps you with your risk assessment quickly. Then you review it and realize that, okay, sometimes even to the extent that, how come I never even thought about this risk or looked at it from this angle? And then the suggestive controls controls tests that come out of some of these prompts. And you realize that it's also translating in quality and output in terms of audit work and helping you identify the risks and then going after those risk areas. And then by the time you are executing the work on the field, you realize that yes, indeed, the areas that you're looking at, they are really, in terms of the risk, they indeed are there, and the controls maybe may not be working or needed to be strengthened. So when it comes to technology, I think it's a way to go. And blending it with the people, I think Chika said something from when we started the conversation, the people, their mindset, to train them to be able to use these tools to move away from sampling to 100% testing. I think I noted something here. Maybe I'll take us to one of the challenges that we are having in terms of our institutions when it comes to automation of processes. One thing I've realized also is that processes are being automated at a very fast rate. And with this also, the challenge I'm seeing is that they are not doing these automations with the second line and third line in mind. I think one experience I had was the automation of salary processing. And yes, end of month, you have organizations bringing in salaries to the bank to be processed. And then management has developed a tool that helps them with the automation and then passing these things through quite fast, so that we don't have a lot of human beings managing this. And then in the course of your review, you realized that there was no room made for internal auditors to be able to review the automated process. In terms of considerations that they're making, they did not take into consideration risk of duplicate transactions and stuff. So you can see that management is moving very fast with automations. How are we catching up with them? Do we really understand what they're doing? Is from the people point. Do we have the tools to be able to go into the database, look at what they have done, and come out with the exceptions? And then the long run, it would help to prevent these operational losses that organizations are likely to face. So I agree 100% with Chika on this. Technology and then the people to run the show is very, very important. Raina, I throw it back to you.
Thank you, Chris and Chica. I wish we didn't have to bring an end to this session. It's been conversational, getting insights in both market, what we can do, what we can change for the profession. But all too soon we'll have to draw the curtains to our discussions. I mean, on the questions part, but of course, our participants would like to really thank them so much for staying on the call to this point. They do have some questions, and with your permission, we would like to get into the chat box, read out some questions, and then we can just decide on who will take what, so we can bring an end to today's session. But it's been insightful. Thank you so much. But for me, three key things that actually do resonate with me so far, it's about the fact that first, efficiency in audit is no longer about doing more with less, but how we working smarter with the tools, how we continuously improving audits process to be able to deliver timely, and of course to be able to deliver meaningful assurance to management and then the large organizations that we serve. Another thing that resonates with me, which is very important, has to do with collaboration, which remains a critical success factors for internal auditors. Strong partnerships between the various assurance partners, internal audit management, risk management, and compliance. How can we create a more transparent and responsive environment where team members are able to work together within the organizations to proactively identify risk and then putting certain measures in place to close any gaps that have been identified. And of course, we've heard consistently about the fact that the future of internal audits will remain adaptable, and the fact that technology is right now is a new thing that we need to embrace. It's here to stay. It's not here to take a job as auditors, but to make us work better and also to position us in a good position as strategic advisors within the organizations that we serve as auditors. So a big thank you to our panelists so far of course, for giving us opportunity to draw in from their decades of experience and sharing practical insights with us so far. So I'll quickly zoom into a chat box and read out the questions that some of our participants have. The first question we have is from Raphael. He's asking that how can we reduce repetitive audit findings across departments, and how can management encourage departments to see audits as a support function rather than a fault finding function? So Joseph, you can take that, and Jika can take the next question that we have. Do you want me to repeat it?
Yes, can you repeat that again, please?
All right. So the question is, how can we reduce repetitive audit findings across departments? That's one. And how can management encourage departments to see audits as a support function rather than fault finding?
Okay. So from the angle of repeated audit findings, I think it goes back to understanding or helping the auditee even understand the observation in the first place. That means that from the word go, the auditee didn't really appreciate the observation that was raised, did nothing about it, or maybe the auditor could not explain the observation well to the auditee. We've had this conversation that you have to get the buy-in of the auditee to understand, especially let them understand the risk associated with the observation that you have raised, so that when you are professing the recommendations, yes, it's something that is done. It's a joint thing that was agreed on in terms of a recommendation, so that the auditee can own the recommendation and implement it. Other than that, you go in, year out, and you still have the same thing. In terms of accountability, yes, we don't want to be talking about this area, but sometimes we need to be a little bit hard on our auditees also. You know that this risk is there. It has been explained to you. We've gone through that first phase. We all agree that this area needs to be looked at. Granted, maybe there will be some financial constraints that may prevent you from, but if there are low-hanging fruits that you could easily work on, and we come in and out of your area every year, if you are still picking the same thing, that means there's something not right with you yourself. And then with that, I think in terms of both experiences that I've had from GC Bank in this space, you realize that it goes into another realm where you, the auditee, you would also have to have some penal actions in terms of your appraisal and your promotions. And because why are you there? You're supposed to help improve the system. And these things, the first occurrence in terms of addressing them, we have penal actions. You realize your promotion is cut by maybe some 10%. The next time you sit up and make sure that you've addressed that area. So it's when persuasion fails, sometimes we have to apply a little bit of force to ensure that we don't have repeated findings. And we look at it also from what we call the audit assurance. That means we go into your space every year. We are there. When we see repeated findings, the MD, I don't know how to even, he's just not going to be happy with you. Because you see, you are not also seeing it from another angle. He also he has bosses or colleagues at the board level that he reports to. It sounds so bad on the MD that, the last time we saw this, why are we seeing the same thing? And at that point, everybody agrees that this risk exists. You can't just be there and then it's just repeating around you. So the persuasions, we'll do them, but when it gets to a certain point, we'll have to apply a little force. That would be the first aspect. Can you just remind me of the second aspect of the question in terms of dealing with repeated, the second aspect
Right.
of the question?
The second part was looking at how can management encourage departments to see audits as a support function rather than fault finding.
Okay, so for me, that one really starts with you, the internal auditor yourself. How are you, your vision that you are carrying, is it aligning with management vision? That's the only way you're going to get the full support of management. But if it's worlds apart, you are moving in one direction and management has a strategic vision and moving in another way, you will never get the buy-in of management. And that takes us into that the part of the standard that asks internal auditors to have at least a strategic plan. And in that part of it also asks you to look at the strategy of the organization and align your strategy with that. So if you're properly aligned, and then you have this conversation with management to understand where management is going. And I think Chika also said something. You are positioning yourself as an advisor. So if you're positioning yourself as an advisor, you will not be having a path that is not aligned with what management is doing. So if management sees that your plans, your actions, everything is aligned with their vision, short, medium, and long term, they will be your advocates. They will communicate for you that, see, the auditor is not coming to find fault with you. We are going somewhere. We believe in the vision that the auditor is carrying because it aligns with ours. And then but you realize that management is even selling your and making your work even much more easy for you, where they are communicating with the auditee as to why you need to cooperate with them, collaborate with them. So this is how I would answer the question. I hope I've been able to do justice to this question for our viewers. Chica, thank you.
I think she said it all, so I don't even have to respond to it again. Thank you,
Okay.
Joseph. But we have an interesting question from Sam. So Sam is the partner for our IT advisory wing, and this question is coming straight to you, Chika. Now it's about the fear factor. So some process owners have lost their bonuses because of audit findings. So how do you think management can balance promoting accountability versus penalizing process owners?
Okay. Sorry, I was on mute. You see this fear factor and this issue. I frankly think that organizations to relook consequence management framework. Now, if we have a clear consequence management framework on what are the conduct issues that you would have that translates to penalizing your bonus, and it is clear to people on the onset, it's helpful. So it doesn't look like you're witch hunting one person, and we don't take the decision after an audit to do that. So if you have a clear consequence management, just like Joseph said about, you have an audit finding number first, and then there's a repeat finding, then this would impact your bonus, right? Frankly, my opinion, we shouldn't use we shouldn't use audits as a tool to winch hunt. Never. It should be a tool to transform, to change a process, to improve. Let me use improve, to improve a process, right? So I think for every organization to have a clear we call it conduct framework here in Standard Chartered, where you have a clear conduct framework, you have a clear accountability on what is a no for the organization, and everybody knows it up front. Then you know that if there's a finding or if there's an exception that comes through, and this is something you have attested to, that there are consequences. I think it's clear. When that happens, then it's clear. But let's also refrain from making decisions one off, like something happens. Have we looked at the root cause? What is the real root cause? Is it total staff negligence? Then, of course, we deal with it. It's not a charitable organization. We're here to make money, and people shouldn't be so careless. But where the root cause is, because it's manual, because there are certain things we shouldn't hold. We shouldn't hold it or penalize the process owner because of that. What we should do is to improve the process, right? And then when there is a repeat finding, then we should take an action. I think it's clear consequence management framework would help address things like this. And audits shouldn't be used for winch hunting at all.
Yeah, very true. I agree. Open communication, having a clear-cut policy so everybody is aligned, there's nothing hidden. It makes it much easier. So it doesn't look like it's audits that is causing all of these things. At least it's a management directive, so it makes it easy.
And Chika would agree with me that we would have too many enemies. Everywhere you pass, the number of eyes watching you, you are the reason, even when you
See,
are not the root cause why somebody lost their bonus. You see?
I'm telling you, Chris. So if you've been in an organization for a while, you would have friends, and then you
Yeah.
join a conversation and like, remember, Chika is now in audit. Because
Yes.
I've moved quite
Yes.
round from different departments. So Chika is now in audit, and I'm like, hey guys, come on, we are friends. Let's talk. If it's an issue, then let's discuss. Let's be open. So so you can imagine if someone that used to be your friend loses bonus because of an audit finding. You
Yes.
can imagine what it will be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very real, very, very, very real.
Very
So as you're
real
saying, yeah,
challenge.
Chika is not in audit. So now when they're adjusting about anything and Chika comes, everybody's going to remain
Yes. The
silent
auditor is here.
because
Don't even mention you
the
by
auditor
name.
is here.
Yeah.
Very true. Very true.
Yeah. Okay, so there's another question here. That's for you, Joseph, from Abigail Aintree. So in some cases, process owners acknowledge audit gaps, understand the associated risk, and commit to remediation actions. However, repeated follow-ups show little or no progress, and root cause analysis suggests management reluctance rather than operational constraints. Now, even after escalation to the audit committee, the issues remain unresolved. In some situations, in such situations, what would you consider the most effective way for internal audit to drive accountability while still maintaining strong stakeholder relationships and positioning itself as a strategic partner. So let me just summarize it, or Joseph, you're good. You heard everything.
I'm actually thinking through it and see what else. Sometimes you have to just give up yourself because
I'm also trying to process this
yes,
because you have escalated it to the highest
yes.
authority. What can you do? You're not God.
What else can you do?
You can't strike.
And then you see you sympathize with the team now. You said, "Oh, you see, it's here. I know what you've done. We've pushed and pushed and pushed, and nothing is given. What else can you do?"
Actually,
It's a
yeah.
way, but sometimes I think for me, what I try to do is that I try to go back to my MD on some of the matters and then go and plead with him that, see, we need to look at this area. And sometimes nothing still happens. It will still be there as it is. But when it's really a significant risk area, and you realize that even the tone at the top does not want to address it, that takes me into the realms of risk management, risk acceptance, and the standard actually talks about that area
Mm.
where clearly you can see that everything you've done everything and this risk is not being addressed. And that's the conversation nobody wants to have with management when it comes to risk acceptance. Even when you start the conversation of risk acceptance with management, they know where you are heading towards. That, see, yes, we all see this thing, but you want me to pen something down that suggests that I'm okay with this and I'm living by this. So that area of the standard, in as much as it's beautiful, we are struggling to even implement that side. So I understand the question, but sometimes there's not much you can do. And you pray that nothing happens. That is all.
That's very true. That's very true.
You
Very
see.
true. That at least
No,
the
but
risk
I
shouldn't.
think just to add to what Chris said is it's the fact that we've documented it. It's important that we ensure we document those conversations. The fact that we have escalated it. I don't have that experience in the kind of organization I work because that won't happen. If we've had those conversations and we agree, except there's a delay, the only thing that can happen is that that issue becomes overdue. And the rationale for it being overdue is stated, but it has to be closed because we've agreed that this is a real risk. Maybe because we have, layers and global
Yeah.
support, right? But if I was sitting in a local bank, I would document it. I will document that the fact that has been escalated because the truth is that if anything happens and the regulators
Yeah.
come for you, internal audits, you should be able to demonstrate that you have, this has been documented. These are the reasons, and it's something that should be in your board reports, consistently with
Yeah.
the board, and you consistently keep reiterating the risk and the exposure that the organization faces by not remediating that risk. I think that's the best you can do. There's nothing else you
Mm.
can do. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very true, Chika. I agree with you because Joseph, you remember when the banking crisis happened, the internal auditors were blamed to an
Oh,
extent that
yes.
you are with us in the organization, you were seeing all of these things. Why didn't you, escalate it? So we shouldn't fall on the back that if I if I write it out, management won't do anything about it. It's our duty to bring it out. Let management take a decision. If they want to accept the risks, then let's document it as it is. From our end, at least we know we've done our part, our part by bringing it out, into the light. So very true. Thank you so much, Joseph and Chika. The last question we have here is, will AI take over the internal audit job? I think for this one from Michael,
Never,
we've
No,
spoken.
never, never. We've spoken about this again. Never.
Yeah,
It's
at
not gonna.
length. We've
So,
spoken
so
about it
what
at
it's
length.
gonna do? What it's going to do is administrative task, things that can be
yes.
handled would go naturally. But you see that critical thinking, you know AI can't do that for us. AI would only work on what you feed into it,
Yes.
right? And so it still needs you to feed into it. So AI would just augment, or what we do. It's not going to replace internal audits. I can assure you. Even if you're an IT auditor, even if you are there's a lot around the AI space that we need to begin to accept. And of course, ethical use and responsible use of AI is important. So once we acknowledge that, and then another critical thing that I think we should mention is around data confidentiality. So you should know the kind of data you're feeding to the AI tools, because you don't want the data of your confidential data of your organization to be out there in whatever cloud or whatever, So those things are things you should, and that's the reasonable or responsible use or ethical use of AI tools. But it will not replace, I know it will never replace the human auditor, because AI is not human. AI won't collaborate. AI won't communicate, right? So it will never replace a human auditor.
And I
The
agree
like
perfectly.
Chika's energy, the energy
We have to protect our profession. We are protecting our profession.
Yeah, very true, very true, very true. Today's discussion has been an interesting one. We would like to say a very big thank you to our panelists. Thank you so much for bringing in your decades of experience to us, sharing, thoughtful contributions, bringing on board interesting perspectives that we believe so much that all of us on the call today will carry these insights to our various organizations and help us to transform audit's function. We would like to call on Elizabeth Quatington Tay, who is an associate director with the Governance Risks and Compliance Services unit in KPMG, to give us a closing remarks, and then we can draw the curtain to today's webinar. Thank you.
Wow, it's been an interesting session. And I would like to say that there's a saying that goes that feedback is the breakfast of champions. So as internal auditors and even KPMG, we are open to receive feedback from you. So you will see a form within the chat area. Please provide us with feedback. We really value it. And I believe it's important for us to know why we are even having this session. So May is recognized as the International Internal Audit Month. And this tradition goes as far back as the 1990s. I was very young then. And I'm not sure, I presumed I was going to be an internal auditor, but it is far back and we continue to celebrate it. And as KPMG, this is our 4th year of celebrating it, giving it attention that it requires. And you ask yourself, why is this month really important for us to celebrate it? I think it's in threefold. It's an opportunity for internal auditors globally to share their unique experiences, to provide examples of how they add value in their organizations, and also highlight the impact they have had on internal controls, risk management, and governance. And I believe these 3 objectives have been met in today's webinar. So this year, this is our 3rd webinar we are having. And as we wrap up, I'll tell you what key next steps we should expect as well. So thank you, Chika, and then Chris. It's no coincidence that each of you have C starting your names. And that is to meet standard 1.1, which is our first standard, right?
Yes.
On honesty and then professional courage. You have been courageous, you have been open enough to tell us where internal auditors really add value, and also where we can also accept the blame for ourselves. Thank you very much. It's been an interesting session, and I've learned so much. And in this virtual auditorium this morning, we've learned a very critical aspect of our work, where we are driving efficiency through collaboration. Internal audit has never been, and it's not a solo sport, right? So we always have to collaborate with our process owners, the board, senior management, and other assurance providers, both internally and externally. So we can't do without these key stakeholders. And it's been very insightful with the knowledge that has been shared. And I would want to highlight key excerpts of this session. So as internal auditors, I think we've gone beyond the stage where we must necessarily provide recommendations for the work we do or the observations we find, because now the standard 14.4 provides 3 approaches within which internal auditors can consider. So 1, either you are developing the recommendations yourself as an internal auditor. 2, you are requesting action plan from your management, or the 3rd one, which is collaborating to develop those action points. And if we do this, I believe the recommendations will see the practical implementation that we always seek, because internal audit, you can't be doing the work and then you realize that your report will just be somewhere and it will not see the light of this. So thank you very much. And I think Chika also highlighted the fact that AI is not a human being to take our jobs. The only point where AI will take your job is when you are not learning how to use it to be more efficient. So please, call to action. This is the time to upgrade yourself with AI skills. And thirdly, internal auditors transitioned from the era where we are just testing transactions here and there to be the value addition trusted advisor, right? So please, if you've seen some internal auditors who have experienced or who have showcased these old medieval ways of auditing, we are in a new era. And that is why we find it very important to share this knowledge on these webinars. So thank you once again, Chris, and then Chika, and then Ruhaina, thank you for moderating the session accurately and ruthlessly. We really appreciate the insight that have been shared. Right, so in terms of key action points, as we wrap up today, we have about 5 or 6 more days to go within the month. So if you're an internal auditor here, it is still enough time for you to make an impact in your organization. Organize a webinar, develop some quizzes here and there to demystify the myth around our profession. Do something and make your mark. Then secondly, it is important that we become very interested in developing or building the next talent of internal auditors. Yes, we are internal auditors now, but in the next few years, we may retire. Who will take on our shoes? So we must build skill sets, find a young talent and brainy ones, train them as well. And in KPMG, we are interested in this because yesterday we had to collaborate with IA Ghana to visit a tertiary institution to let them know the existence of a profession called internal audit. When we did a poll, when we asked them who has heard about internal auditing, it was sad. Just a few. They've heard about auditing, and when they hear about auditing, it's about the external auditing part. But we're bold enough to tell them that this is a fulfilling profession, a profession where you have access to almost everybody within the organization, from the board of directors to senior management to the security man to even the janitor. It is something they must consider, and they are very interested in pursuing this, and we are available to mentor them along the way. Right. And as a call to action again, if you're an internal auditor here, it is important that you share knowledge about the new global internal audit standard with the board and senior management. At least, if you can't do the entire standard, just do domain 3. And if you have any challenges to fulfilling this, please reach out. We are available to support you so that we can share knowledge to our stakeholders to provide us with the needed support. Because if you don't provide us with the support, trust me, we won't be able to achieve our purpose, where we are strengthening the organization's ability to create, to protect, and to sustain value. We must share the knowledge, and once they know, they will always do better. Right. And as KPMG, we support our clients to adopt AI in their operations, bearing in mind some of the risks associated with the use of AI, because we apply our trusted AI framework. So if you need any assistance, we are available to support you. We will play a video subsequent to my closing remarks, and you can stay behind and then watch it and pick some lessons from it. Again, we have a DNA training coming up next month. We will share the flyer in the chat area for people in Ghana to consider. We'll see you in our next webinar, which would happen next week. Mark your calendars, and we'll wrap up all the activities we have conducted within this month of International Internal Audit Month. Thank you very much, our moderator, our panelists, and our honorable guests who have been with us all this period. Thank you, and see you soon. Bye-bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Chika,
Thank you
So we
so
call
much.
a detailed
Chika, I'll
closing
connect
remarks.
online.
Please, let's
on
connect.
LinkedIn.
Yes, please.
Okay.
Thank you so
All right.
much. I really enjoyed this session. Thank
Thank you.
Yes,
you.
thank you too. Thank you,
All
everyone.
right.
Enjoy the rest of the day.
Yeah,
All right.
bye.
See you
Bye.
next
Bye.
week. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.